What if studying the Bible is not just about getting the right answers, but learning how to ask the right questions, or rather, better questions? Matthew 11, has a couple messengers sent to him from John the Baptist, and John's inquiring, "Are you the one who's to come, or shall we look for another?" A question to ask is, who is this one who is to come? What does John mean? What does he expect? Where does he get this idea of the one who is to come? What is the Old Testament basis for that idea or this person who plays this role? And shall we look for another? John says. And Jesus answered him, or the messengers, "Go and tell John what you hear and see." He wants their eyewitness testimony to either encourage John because he's doubting, or John already knew who Jesus was. He ain't doubting. He just wants his messengers, his disciples, to have a stronger sense of who Jesus is. Either way, why does Jesus tell the messengers to specifically do this? Tell John you see the blind receive their sight, and the lame walk, and the lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear, and the dead are raised up, and the poor have good news preached to them. I might want to think about when I see a list forming of ideas or characteristics, what do these items all have in common? The blind receiving sight, the lepers being cleansed, the deaf hear. What is the overall point being made by Jesus here? What are the commonalities or similarities? What are the differences? Essentially, what is being highlighted through each of these activities? And then I also might want to consider, the dead being raised or the poor having good news preached. All of these ideas, if this is a quotation or a reference to the Old Testament, where do I find this? And how does this help John if he is indeed doubting? And that's the other question. Is he doubting? And blessed is the one who's not offended by me. Now, before we assume Jesus means John is the one who's offended by Jesus, I think Jesus is using this opportunity to make a point to the crowds and the disciples and John's and saying, hey, the one who is blessed is the one who's not offended by me. What does it mean to be offended by Jesus? In this immediate context in chapter 11, where have we seen any idea of Jesus causing offense in people, or people being bothered or annoyed, or having their expectations kind of let down, like, we are disappointed by who you are, we did not expect the Messiah to look like this? Where do we see that idea in the rest of Matthew's gospel? Right? We ask questions. And as they went away, Jesus began to speak to the crowds concerning John. So once they leave, Jesus addresses the crowds about John. He's going to talk, hey, what did you go out into the wilderness to see? All these different things. I might want to ask the question, hey, why does Jesus specifically wait for the messengers to leave in order to address who John is to the crowds? Is that intentional and strategic? Is there a narrative point being made about John and his ministry? Either way, we'll jump back into verse 7 in the next study. And if you didn't know, we have a free 7-day challenge